All right, we are live. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here. We've had a little bit of technical difficulties, PC and security and browsers and all that, but we finally made it. Before that, you're going to just hear talking and nobody on screen. I'm going to share this right here. If you are joining us now, and I see there are some people getting on, please share this on your page. Share this to your hunting groups, your outdoors groups, if they don't mind, of course. And we'll get started here. Looking for my BHA group here. There we go. All right, so thanks for being with us. We have what we think is going to be an exciting talk tonight. Colonel Michael Abell here. Is it Abell? I didn't ask you that. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's Abell.
Abell, awesome. Colonel Michael Abell is here to talk to us. He is the vice chairman, and please correct me if I mess anything up or leave anything out. He is the vice chairman of the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers Kentucky chapter. He is involved with Safari Club International, Kentuckiana chapter. I don't know if you're in the League of Kentucky Sportsmen. I know you're involved with them. So very experienced sportsman, outdoorsman, retired Army colonel. A lot of things to say about him, and really appreciate you joining us. He joined us for the magazine this issue in May, and we talked about some of the awesome things that BHA is doing in Kentucky, partnering with the department, and really working behind the scenes so people like you and me can enjoy the outdoors in Kentucky, whether it's hunting, fishing, hiking, the WMAs, whatever. They're really putting in some work. So I appreciate you being here. If you want to just start and tell everyone about yourself and talk about some of the things that BHA has going on this summer when everything opens back up, that'd be great.
Hey, John. First off, with all the technical difficulties we had, can you hear me good?
Yeah, you're great, man. We didn't know if we were going to get to do this. I was getting a little worried.
I think COVID infected my computer for about 20 minutes. I'm Colonel retired Mike Abell. I spent 26 years total service, 24 years in the infantry. And I finished up my active duty career on active duty with the Kentucky National Guard. Very proud of that. My wife's a lifelong Kentuckian, and I always tell people that that's how Kentucky improves the state of Kentucky. They have all these beautiful women that attract talented men from all over the country. So she got me to retire here, and of course, I've been living here for over 20 years. But
we're glad to have you.
When I retired on my birthday 3 years ago, I started attending all these meetings, both of the Department of Fish and Wildlife, League of Kentucky Sportsmen, and I've been active in a bunch of organizations previously. Since I had time to attend all these meetings, I started attending the meetings and taking notes. And I started sharing those notes when I got home from the meetings with my friends 3 years ago in the sportsmen and women's community. And they encouraged me to share the notes wider, to make all of the interesting things I was learning by attending these meetings more available to everybody. And then a friend of mine, Ben Bishop, who's also a Backcountry Hunters and Anglers leader, said that we should take it one step further and make it a podcast. So basically what I've been doing for the last 3 years is attending every possible meeting I can because I'm retired. And I know everybody's got to work and everybody's got a family. Well, I now have time on my hands, and I spent 26 years serving the country. And after you retire, it's weird because you don't have anybody to serve. Yeah. So it was really wonderful. It was really wonderful for me because now I get to serve my fellow man and woman sportsmen by going to all the meetings, taking the notes, and sending it out to everybody and saying, here's what's going on. Please contact the actual people in charge. I'm just a concerned sportsman who's a officer in Kentucky Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, and an officer in Kentucky Safari Club, Kentuckiana Safari Club, but keeping the sportsmen and women informed so that they can participate has been really my mission for over 2 years now.
Yeah, I think, when we talked the first time, one thing we talked about BHA, we talked about things I have going on with Kentucky Outdoors. But one thing that we talked about that, I need to be more involved in, that all sportsmen need to be more involved in, is legislation. And so, you kind of open my eyes to some of the things going on and things that we don't even hear about, and so it's very important. These different clubs that we have throughout the state, and we have some that cover the entire state like BHA, and we have some that are regional clubs. It's important for us to be involved. It's important for us to be plugged in. And, as, guys like you are able to kind of dissect this for us and break it down, because some of us were like, man, that's over my head, right? But we can rely on guys like you that get that information for us. If we need to call senator, if we need to go to a meeting, whatever we can do, because there's some important things going on that we need to know about, especially when it comes to money and how it's being used. So I think you're doing a great service there. You want to speak to any of the things that the current legislation or anything that's going on that people may not have heard of?
Yeah, I appreciate that. What you're alluding to is kind of the sweet spot or the center of gravity for backcountry hunters and anglers. We exist on a national and really an international level because we're a North American organization. We actually have 46 states with state chapters, and we have 3 Canadian provinces with chapters. We are not for any particular species. We're not for trout. We're not for bass. We're not for redfish. We're not for grouse. We're not for quail. We're not for pheasants. We're not for turkeys. We are for public lands, public waters, and access for all hunters, fishers, trappers, and really anybody that uses public lands. Our motto is keep public lands in public hands. So we're a big tent organization that does what we can to make sure that everybody that uses public lands and public waters continues to have that for not just this generation, for generations to come. And to do that, we have to be involved in our state legislatures. Part of my classical training and part of the degrees the Army sent me away to get was how to work at the federal legislature. So I took those lessons and I applied them to what we're doing here in the state, and how to speak to and how to do what we call either grassroots lobbying or direct lobbying of our state legislators on behalf of sportsmen and women. I don't really worry about too much else. Our sweet spot is what matters to the sportsmen and sportswomen in the state. So we worked on about 6 different gun control bills. We worked on a expansion of coyote hunting bill. We worked on a bill that would improve and modernize the penalties for poaching. And we worked on a bill that would improve and modernize the ability to donate game meat to organizations like Hunters for the Hungry. There was over 500 bills. So it is an exhaustive amount of work to work on over 500 bills, between the House and the Senate. But we focus on the ones that are important to sportsmen. And since this all started with my really good friends not having the time to do the research, and since I'm retired and I have the time, and it's just blown up since then. That's what I do. I spend all my time working and keeping my buddies informed.
We should appreciate it. Can you, I know that BHA has kind of hit pause like the rest of us during this COVID pandemic, if you will. But I know you guys are in talks of things that you're going to do for the state here this summer and in conjunction with the department. Can you talk about a couple of those? And, what I like about it is you guys, when you said you're not for a certain species, you're also not for a certain part of the state. Like you're working out in Eastern Kentucky, you're working Central, Western. Talk about a couple of those you guys have going on.
So Kentucky Backcountry Hunters and Anglers was ratified as a chapter on May the 2nd, 2019. So we have been a chapter just over a year. And we had to develop our own organization. And we decided to follow the organization of the Fish and Wildlife Commission and to follow the example of the League of Kentucky Sportsmen, which also has organized themselves in an analogous way to the Fish and Wildlife Commission, meaning Kentucky Backcountry Hunters and Anglers organize ourselves in 9 districts, the same as we have 9 fish and wildlife districts. So each one of our district commissioners is then able to have a relationship with each one of the fish and wildlife commissioners to work on regional issues that are germane to sportsmen and women. And we've had some success there. That's how we're organized. Our bailiwick, what we do is we don't have like an annual fundraiser. We don't have a big annual this or that. What we try to do is have a public lands or public waters work day monthly. And then we also try to have what we call a pint night, where we can get together all over the state at any place and meet members and prospective members and have a discussion over a beer and say, hey, here's the things we're working on in your region. What's important to you? And then we work on all that and we bring it back to our monthly meeting. And then people like me and our chairman, Stephen Flagg, and our secretary, Griff Bowdy, and our treasurer, Grant McAllister, we go to the statewide meetings and say, look, this is what the sportsmen are telling us from all over the state. And it's really worked really good. And in fact, in the first year, we had more members than some very old established legacy members. And the cool part, I was an officer in a couple of different conservation organizations before this, but I would go to those meetings, and at 45 years old, I was the youngest guy in the room. Now I'm 48 years old, and I'm the oldest guy in the room at BHA.
That's great.
It's a youthful, strong outfit. We've just this year we've done 8 public lands or public waters work days. We've done them all the way from Paintsville, all the way west. Oh goodness, to what was it? We did. I'm drawing a blank here, but we did some habitat work on a lake west of I-65. Spent a whole day building fish habitat and helping the department sink it out there. So what we've done is we've developed relationships with the wildlife biologists and the fisheries biologists, so that when they have a project and they're short manpower, we show up. Just like when they didn't have enough people to hike trout into Chimney Rock, we provided 14 people and we stocked 450 trout backpack.
That's incredible.
Trout. So that's kind of what we do. And had COVID-19 not slowed us down, we would have had 13 events in our first 12 months.
Ben Bishop says it was Barren River Lake.
That's exactly what it was. Who said that?
Ben Bishop.
Ben's my partner on my podcast. He understands that my combat stress is poor memory. I don't have PTSD. I have post-traumatic growth. Combat made me stronger, but I can't remember anything.
Hey guys, this is I think a great point or a great place in the show to make sure you're liking the video as you're watching, hitting the thumb button down there. I know that sounds kind of cheesy and corny, but that's how Facebook shares our video and puts it in front of more people. Make sure you're commenting and sharing. I think now is we can kind of transition to talking more about the elk population. We've talked about BHA and all the things you guys have going on. And I think, you correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, BHA is what, $35 to join? Is that correct?
It fluctuates. I think at one point they were doing a promotion last year. It was $25 and a t-shirt. I think it is now $35. And
So, I mean, that is a $35 you can get out. You can volunteer, work with these guys, and it all goes for back to us. I mean, we're all reaping the benefits there. But I think the most popular thing going on in Kentucky, as far as outdoors right now, is the elk draw that happened last Saturday. Almost 600 people were drawn publicly. I know there's more landowner tags and commissioner tags, things like that. I'm not an expert on the elk draw, on elk hunting. Colonel here has a lot more knowledge about it. But before we start, let me say we are not affiliated with the department, the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. BHA works with them. We're not anti-department. We love the department, right? We want them to be the best department in the country. Regardless, there may be a couple of people that question what we're doing here, but we are pro-department. But I think there's various perspectives here. The biologist and the department has perspective, and they have statistics and data on their side. But also the people who live in Eastern Kentucky, the guides that scout and hunt these elk, and the 600 people a year roughly that get drawn, they have a perspective too, and they're seeing things and they have questions. So we have about 4 questions I think we're going to tackle here. And I know that the Colonel has some data and research and is pretty involved in or informed, I guess I could say, with the elk situation. So I'm going to, I'm trying this here. This is our first question. Hopefully you can see it. If you can see that question at the bottom of the screen, will you just hit like for me? And that way I can tell. Colonel, I don't think you can see it at all, can you?
I can.
Is that? Oh, you can. Awesome. So first question, and since Saturday, I've talked to a lot of people, tried to do some research, tried to see what questions people have. So that's kind of where these come from. And so the first question is just about the draw, or just about the population, rather. Second question is about the draw. Based on the observation of sportsmen and women around the state, what is the current status of the elk herd? And before he speaks, let me say this. There are a wide spectrum of opinions on this, right? Wide spectrum. And so I'm not the expert here. He knows a lot more than I do. So tell us your thoughts, your observations, people you're talking to. What is the current status?
So first of all, let me really quick let me wind this back really quick.
Sure, yeah.
I don't propose to be an expert on anything that I haven't personally done in my life. So if you guys want to talk about the security situation in central Iraq in 2004, 5, and 6, okay, fine.
I can't.
Yeah, right. If you want to talk about being deployed after 9/11, okay, fine. What I have done in the last 3 years is I've made myself an expert by reading the department's documents and talking to officials at the department and talking to our fish and wildlife commissioners. So when you said this was going to be the first question that we're going to discuss tonight, I just went back to my previous research and all the documents I've highlighted and have in my notebook, because I go to these meetings and I want to be informed. So let's just talk about what the department's published documents say about the elk herd. The 2017-2018 official department elk report says that there were 11,000 elk in the state of Kentucky. The most recent official published elk report, the 2018-2019 Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources elk report says, and I quote, the current estimated population is 13,106 elk. So those are big numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Most people, especially if you talk to people who live in the elk zone, the 16 counties that are in the elk zone, if you talk to the elk guides who make their living, and I'm very proud of our Elk Guides Association for being a much more professional organization in the last 5 or 6 years. And I I can't speak highly enough of those folks, but if you talk to them, and they spend more time in the field than anybody. If you in the military, we use a term called man days. It's the number of men and women you have on a mission for a day. A man day is one man or one woman for a day. If you look at the number of man days that the Elk Guides Association has in the mountains in Eastern Kentucky, it's way more than you could ever, calculate what our biologists and our seasonal workers for the department have. So you have to listen to what the Elk Guides Association and the people that work for those outfitters are saying. And they're saying that we're nowhere near the published number of 13,106, which is the official number. So people get upset and they want to throw numbers out. But people don't want to sit down and read a 32-page report, which I will do. So really, honestly, it's about what our perceptions are about what the elk herd currently is. So folks will say it's not the 13,106 that's published in the department's 2018-19 elk report. And one of the reasons that they believe that is our success rate. Our hunter success rate has plummeted. Early on in the late 90s, when we started stalking elk, and in the early years when we started hunting elk, our success rate was over 90%. I'm just going to go to, I did my detailed research back to 2012. In 2012, the success rate was 70%. In 2013, it was 70%. In 2014, it was 68%. In 15, it was 64%. In 16, it was 63%. Then it plummeted from 16 to 17, from 63% to 45%. And then this year, it's approximately 40%. So the perception is, based on the fact that our success rate, our hunter success rate is going down, that we have less elk. And there's multiple reasons for that. The biggest reason is habitat loss. You can go back to some laws that were enacted as we were getting out of the heyday of coal, and they were required to reclaim the land, and the laws that were enacted required them to use species of vegetation that held the soil. And those fescues and those plants like autumn olive, they were invasive and they're really not good. And eventually they start to take over the landscape. They hold the soil well, they stop erosion. But if you don't arrest their development, it will become a tangled mess. And that is bad for elk. And so we've had some habitat loss in conjunction with that. We've also had some hunting area loss. We lost, and if you talk to officials of the department, we lost for good reason. Okay, I don't want to throw stones here. We lost for good reason the Paul Van Boeven area, and we lost the fish trap area for hunting, and we lost some other smaller areas. One of the other reasons that hunter success rate has gone down is the initial stocking of those cow elk. Those cows have gotten smarter, and I can talk later about what that really means. People might find that to be a funny statement, but when cow elk get smarter, hunter success rate goes down. And there's really 4 other reasons for the decline. One could be predation of the elk calves. The other could be a disease called brainworm. Certainly not CWD. We do not have CWD, but brainworm. And then poaching, we've recently found out, has been a more significant effect than we thought. And then, of course, moving elk. We've moved a significant number of elk. So those are really the things that have affected our current population. But let me say this on the department's behalf and on the elk and deer coordinator's behalf. They just started a new study, a new 3-year study in conjunction with UK. So I think by 2023, we're going to have some really solid numbers. And I know Americans are the most impatient. I've served in 11 countries. I know Americans, we're the most impatient people in the world. So to tell somebody there's going to be to tell somebody it's going to be a 3-year study before we know what the hell we're talking about. The bottom line is our previous studies just were not effective. Using techniques that they use out west to estimate elk herds do not work. Those techniques do not work in the mountains of eastern Kentucky. It's significantly more forested, it's significantly thicker. So our previous attempts, and I keep saying our, I don't work for the department. The department's previous, I keep saying our because it's my department. Previous attempts just were not successful to estimate the elk herd. So that's the answer, honestly, the first question. I know people are going to want me to give a number. The department's number officially is 13,106.
Yeah.
If you want to get an estimate from someone that's going to give you an opinion, I honestly think that you ought to contact the Elk Guides Association, talk to your favorite elk guide. They have way more experience in those mountains than I do, and ask them what they think the herd number is.
So Brandon here, he asked, we'll get to this answer, Brandon, but we want you to hold on. He said he was drawn for the first time this year, which congratulations, man. I mean, you're a lucky guy. But he said it sounds like it's going to be challenging. It's probably always been challenging, and we'll get to you in just a second, Brandon. I didn't want to think we overlooked that question. And this is the next question we have. And I'll preface this question with a lot of people have said, well, the draw is rigged. The draw is not fair. Certain people get favored over others for the draw. And we shouldn't have a draw. We should go to a point system. You don't have to speak to all those. But what do you think, based on the people you've talked to, how opportunities can increase, and honestly, should they increase right now? So you take that any direction you want.
Okay. So the
loaded question. I'm sorry.
So the interesting part about this is neither you nor I work for the department. Neither you nor I get any benefit or any money from the department. So we can speak as honestly as we can. Department officials are going to be bound to their job, especially the scientists. Yeah. They're going to be bound to the science, and it's very hard for them to suppose or to supposition or to have a supposition on certain things. Let me speak to, is the elk draw fair? The general lottery elk draw, which this year was 596 tags, is 100% fair.
Agree.
If someone wants to challenge me on that, I will be a very mild, a very humble middle-aged man. But be careful. Be careful. I'm a former airborne ranger, and I don't take well to evil comments. The fact of the matter is the general elk draw is 100% legit. I don't care how much your feelings have been hurt. I've looked into it. I cannot find any fault in it. I am constantly working with other leaders and conservation groups across the state, and we send so many official requests for information under the Open Records Act, etc. We can't find a hole in the general elk draw, which we call the lottery. So this year there were 596 lottery tags. What people conflate, people conflate issues, or people take the general elk draw and they take the things that they see in life and they go like this, and they're not always the same. So here's the deal. There is some concern with the commissioner's elk tags. The commission is available under law, or is able under law to give 10 elk tags every year. They always give one to the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. Why? Because the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation provided the seed money for our elk herd. Without the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, we wouldn't have an elk herd.
Right.
They always give one to the Fish and Wildlife, to the charity arm of the Fish and Wildlife that runs the Salado Center. Okay. Why? Because that is the Salado Center is where their headquarters is, and those people do all of the education work. That the Fish and Wildlife Foundation is the name of it, and they're a charity that does the charity work of our department. So they always get one.
I live about 15 minutes from the Salado Center, and those people they're excellent. My girls love it. We love going in there to fish and to look around. It's great. So.
Yeah, the young lady that runs the Salado Center and her husband are friends of mine, and I am a huge fan of them. If they're not the most genuine outdoors man and woman in Kentucky, we ought to be able to give them an award for being the most genuine outdoors man and woman in Kentucky. But anyway, I digress. So people look at those commissioners tags and see the same institutions getting them every year, and they think, okay, that's rigged. Well, it might have been. Our current commission is trying to change that. And I can't prove that it was rigged, but it sure looked like the same people got those tags year after year. The other thing about those tags is about our elk program and the tags, there's multiple different kinds of elk tags. It's not just the general draw. So there are a significant number of additional tags that go out through the department through different programs, and they are available to people that do landowner cooperation, that open a significant portion of their of the land that they own or lease to elk hunting and or to elk capture. And those people get a tag, and those tags are transferable. And so those tags could also be sold to someone. So it would look like the same person, if they were willing to buy one year after year, it would look like the same person got one.
Right.
So in my opinion, in my research, I really don't see any nefarious activity. And while I love the department, I'm not paid by the department for any reason to say that. I genuinely believe that the lottery is legit. I think that there's additional tags. So my research, I went hot and heavy in 2017. In 2017, there were 700 elk tags in the general lottery. There were actually 700, and let me double check before I tell you wrong. There were actually 781 tags issued. So there were 81 tags that were issued under these other programs that are transferable. And those transferable tags could go to the same people year in and year out. They could go to national celebrities that want to hunt an elk in Kentucky.
Yeah.
They are not the lottery tags. They are tags that are given out for people participating in research and opening their property to elk capture. They're tags that are given to people for opening their property to the public, to allow the public to hunt their property. So that's that. The question was, or at least I think I remember the question you said was the steps the department is doing to help hunters have more opportunity.
Right.
Is that the question?
Yeah. And do we need more opportunities? Should we scale those back right now? What are your thoughts on that? It's not going to be popular if you say that, by the way, but I think you can handle it.
Yeah, I got broad shoulders. I've been shot at before. When you brought up the elk draw and the legitimacy of the elk draw, I think I had to, from my perspective and being as close to this as I've been for the last few years since I retired, I had to say 100% think it's legit. I do think that there are some things that aren't legit about the commissioner's tags, or let me rephrase. There are things that haven't been legit that I think are getting fixed.
Yeah.
And I think the observations of sportsmen in that context make them think the entire program is not legit, and that's not the case. So the lottery that you witnessed at the Mountain Arts Center and the people that just were issued those lottery tags, that's legit. As far as steps to improve opportunity, I think the Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Fish and Wildlife Commission in our current situation is doing about all they can. I I really believe that. You know, in addition to those lottery permits, there's the let me break down for everybody the names of the other permits I've been talking about. There's special commission permits, which are 9 Fish and Wildlife commissioners can issue. There's landowner permits. These are people that own land that provide access to hunters, to the public, that can get a permit, and that permit is transferable. So if John Stepp, the host of this program, and I had enough money, we could buy that landowner's permit year after year after year. And it would look to everybody like, how the hell did we get a Kentucky elk permit every year? Then there's also something called voucher permits and something called restoration permits. And so if you look back to the last year that I really did a serious deep dive on all these numbers, again, there were 700 lottery permits in 2017, but there was actually 781 total permits. Well, the 81 is either a commission permit, a landowner permit, a voucher permit, or a restoration permit. So going back to opportunity, you know, once the department gets the results of this 3-year study, they're going to be able to develop what we call a harvest objective. Currently, because they're not 100% sure what the population is, they can't really give you a harvest objective. And without a harvest objective, they've been very conservative in issuing tags in the last 3 years. So, you know, back in 2016, we had 900 tags. Back in 2014, we had 1,000 tags. The Fish and Wildlife Commission has been very conservative in issuing tags. And so we're down from 1,000 tags in 2016 to 596 tags, general tags this year.
Right.
And I think that's a good thing.
A lot of people don't like that.
So,
but, you know, if we're putting the elk herd first, that's, like you said, that's probably the right direction.
Yeah. I'm not going to argue with the department. I was sitting in the meeting this year when they decided to do 596 tags again this year. I argued for a legitimate harvest objective, and people in the room who do it for a living said, look, we're not 100% sure on the population number. Without the population number and without using a hunter success, you use a hunter success rate and a population number to develop a harvest objective.
Yeah.
And you have one without the other, the math doesn't work. And so they said, look, we're going to be very conservative, and we're going to once again issue 596 general lottery tags. And I'm okay with that. And I think the sportsmen should be, because it's being conservative with the resource.
Yep. All right. So moving on. You ready to move on? Next question. Yeah, let me, I'm looking over here in the comments. Brian Mackey, I hope he's still on here with us. And I think this is what he was asking, what you've already answered. You can see there, it says, has the department ever stated its harvest goals for elk herd? That's what you just spoke to, right?
Yeah. For those of you who don't know Brian Mackey, he's a hell of a sportsman and a hell of a farmer. Thanks for the question, Brian. I've never seen a published harvest objective, which is concerning. So when you say, has the department ever stated its harvest goals for the elk herd? Generally speaking, let me use very general numbers. If our elk herd was 1,000 animals, and if the biologist determined that the carrying capacity, there's a social carrying capacity, meaning, you know, if elk are in people's yards eating their flowers, and if they're running into them with their cars, human beings get angry, and that's a social carrying capacity. There's too many elk. But then there's also an ecological or a biological carrying capacity, and those are both real numbers. And so if we had 1,000 elk on the landscape, and, you know, the carrying capacity was 900, both social and ecological, then we basically have 100 animals that we could take off the landscape every year as a renewable resource. And so if we had 100 animals that we could take off the landscape every year as a renewable resource, and hunter success rate was 20%, then you just do the math. if only 1 in 5 people were going to be successful, 20%, 1 in 5, were going to be successful in harvesting an elk, and you could kill 100 every year, then you could issue 500 tags every year, because only 1 in 5 is going to succeed.
Right.
So that's how harvest objective works. And I've never seen a published harvest. His question is a harvest goal. I'm pretty sure he means a harvest objective. That's how a harvest objective works. If you're in a biology class, my undergrad's in biology, my master's is in strategic studies, which is not worth discussing right now. It's hard to explain. That a harvest objective is something I've never seen. So to answer Brian's question, no, I've never seen it.
Gotcha. All right, next question we have here. A lot of people I talked to, and not even talked to, but saw questions about with 600, roughly 600 people getting ready to elk hunt this fall, and questions on people saying there aren't as many elk as there used to be, whether that's true or not. Elk guiding seems to be very important. And so a lot of people complained that it was too expensive. And I mean, I looked at some websites, you've got anywhere from $1,500 to $5,500. So it's a wide spectrum there. So 2 questions. Has that affected, I guess, the popularity of the elk guides affected DIY hunters? And is it even smart to go out there, especially if you're inexperienced, and try to do it yourself? Like, what is the difficulty level? What approach, I guess, should people be taking?
So I moved my computer to the game room tonight, and that's only 3 of the bulls that we've killed in the last 10 years. I think between my wife and I, we've killed 7 bulls on public land with our bow in the last 10 years.
Wow.
And we've done them all out west. I've yet, nor has my wife, drawn a bull tag in Kentucky. And to answer the question of how has elk guiding and the prices to hire a guide affected DIY hunters, I'm a DIY hunter. I have been invited to help because I've been successful. I think I've killed 5 bulls and 3 cows in the last 12 years out west on public land with my bow. One bull with a rifle in addition. So anyway, I've been invited by a bunch of my buddies to help them in Kentucky. And what I will tell you, my impression and my honest opinion, and this is just my opinion of the way we do business in Kentucky, it has nothing to do with guides and the price of guides. It has to do with land ownership and terrain. And it's something that you just can't argue with. In the 16 counties in the Kentucky elk zone, we have a patchwork of public and private. Our elk herds are led by matriarchal cows. Okay. So for those of you who don't understand the biology of elk, just accept what I'm saying because it's a fact. Old cows lead elk herds, and they're extremely smart. There was a study done by the University of Alberta, and one of the scientists, Mr. Thornton, was quoted as saying a 10-year-old herd cow is an expert at avoiding human pressure. She's almost impossible to kill. Yeah. That's how good an old cow gets. And they lead those elk herds. Okay. So when you take the biology of elk and the fact that a matriarchal cow who's been through 10 to 15 elk seasons has learned how to avoid pressure, when you take that in conjunction with a patchwork of public and private that we have in Kentucky, what happens is very shortly after the start of the elk season, those matriarchal herd cows start moving those herds into deep timber. Once the pressure gets even worse, they move those herds onto private. And we don't have huge, massive swaths of public like we have out west here in Kentucky. So what we have is a system that lends itself to guided hunts, because those outfitters are going to get access to those very good parcels of private that regular people like me and you, John, can't get.
Right.
And so it's not something that's, well, the Kentucky hunt is against DIY hunters, or the Kentucky hunt is crappy for do-it-yourselfers. It's not that at all. The fact of the matter is, land ownership in the elk zone is so fragmented, and the biology of the animals is such that once they're pressured, they're going to move to the least amount of pressure, and those ancient, old, smart cows are going to move them onto private. And
Yep.
once they do, your only option to kill one is a very smart outfitter, a very professional outfitter that has secured the rights to hunt on that private.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, if I ever draw a Kentucky tag, I'm immediately going to call Donald, the president of the Elk Guys Association, and book a hunt. I've tried to help three friends do it DIY on public, and my opinion is, if you don't get one in the first 6 to 10 days, you're not gonna get one on public. They've just moved to private.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. I'm from Harlan County. I live in Frankfort, but I'm from Harlan County. And if someone who is not from there and is not very experienced goes to Harlan or Bell or Letcher or one of those counties, and that's where they're hunting their elk, I mean, the terrain is going to really devour them. It is not easy to navigate through that if you don't know exactly what you're doing. Now, you can go up to Bledsoe and on Pine Mountain, place where I live near when I lived in Harlan, and those old guys up there can run those ridges and hillsides as well as anyone, right? But if you're from out west, if you're not from there, I just don't see how you could do it. I really don't.
Yeah, and to be honest, my mom and my aunt were both from Barberville, and I said I finished my career in the Kentucky National Guard. I commanded the infantry battalion that's headquartered in Barberville.
Yeah,
and I've been all over the elk zone. Alpha Company 1st of 149th Infantry is headquartered in Harlan, and I've got some really great friends down there. I couldn't agree with you more. And if you got friends down there and you can claim kin down there and people have land down there, Trinity, one of our elk guides, Trinity briefed at the Mountain Arts Center Saturday. He briefed everybody from the elk guides perspective, and he said, you're going to have to do a lot of scouting, and you're going to have to know some people down here if you try to do it DIY. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah,
couldn't agree more. But it's not that our elk guides and or our system are against DIY hunters. They're not.
Right.
It's the way our land is owned, and it's the way the Daniel Boone National Forest lays out in the 16 counties. Mm-hmm. The elk are going to go on to private unless you know that owner. I mean, I've literally been helping a veteran buddy of mine who drew an elk tag, and we were tracking fresh track. I mean, fresh track. There was hot pee. You could put your hand down and feel the heat coming off the elk piss. And we ran into a fence. Yeah. And there's nothing we could do. I looked at him and was like, man, you might as well go have a sandwich because we're done. But
so yeah, and there are you do a Google search or a Facebook search, you can find elk guides in Kentucky very easily. There are several outfitters out there. I'm not going to name any in particular, but if you are an elk guide and you want to be featured in a magazine or something, let me know, because I just want to hear the stories. I want to post the pictures, not for us, but for the people who may be watching or reading that are interested in looking for a guide. So last question here, and then if we have any of the comments, you can answer. So I think this is the big one. I think this is what everyone wants to know. And again, I have no expertise in this. You know way more than I do. That's why you're on here. But based on the information we have, observation, data, statistics, research, everything, what are the next steps, in your opinion, that need to be taken to grow the elk population?
Let me back up really quick to close out the last question.
Oh, I'm sorry, I jumped in.
No, you're good. You're totally good. If you draw an elk tag in the state of Kentucky, our Elk Guides Association, the Kentucky Elk Guides Association, has made it. They've made what they do so much more professional in the last few years. Even if you think you're going to hunt them on your own, you deserve, or because you drew that lottery tag, you should call them. You should call the president, call Don, the president, call one of those people, call one of those guides who is a member of the Elk Guide Association, which makes them much more professional, and talk to them before you decide to do it on your own. Mm-hmm. It will be really good research for you. And honestly, they don't pay me. Hell, half of them don't even like me. I'm telling you right now, if I drew a tag, I would call one of them and book with them, because that's the way you're going to kill one in the state of Kentucky, in my opinion. I've tried it. I've helped my friends try it. DIY, it's really hard to do.
And I just looked it up. They have a Facebook page, so it's a public page, so you can go there. I'm sure they have a lot of information there. So,
yep. So what are the next steps to grow the elk herd? We have a couple of our Fish and Wildlife commissioners are very forward-thinking gentlemen, and I'm not going to name the gentleman that said this, but on the January 31st Fish and Wildlife Commission meeting, one of our Fish and Wildlife commissioners said, and I quote, "The elk season details need to be modified with the objective of growing and maintaining the herd, including limiting the number of cows taken." I say again, the elk season details be modified with the objective of growing and maintaining the herd, including limiting the number of cows taken. I can tell you once again that I'm very proud of our Elk Guides Association, because many of our more successful guides have stopped guiding cow hunts in the last 2 to 3 years, because our cow, especially our second cow season, we're killing bred cows. Those cows are carrying a calf, and having killed one in New Mexico a number of years ago, a late cow, and when I field dressed her, I pulled out a calf. I'm never going to do that again.
Yeah.
So some of our commissioners and a lot of our elk guides have already decided they're done killing cow elk. I personally believe we need to severely limit our cow elk harvest. And there's some that say, well, that will limit opportunity. Well, then increase the bull tags by the same number. I mean, what a wonderful headline it would be across the hunting community nationwide to say Kentucky eliminates, I'm just going to say eliminates, Kentucky eliminates cow elk harvest for the next 3 years, but increases bull permit opportunities for the same 3 years. The success rate's not going to change. The success rate's not going to change. And our cows are going to have calves for those next 3 years. So potentially, Hunter, if you look at it and you do the statistical analysis, you'll actually end up with more elk at the end of those 3 years, because in 2 years, calves that hit the ground that are cows are going to be making their own calves. Mm-hmm. So it's, it becomes exponentially, better for our herd, and it becomes an investment in the herd. One of the things that I would say we need to watch is we need to watch poaching. Poaching is a bigger problem than we think. And one of the problems that we have statewide with poaching is the penalties for poaching are anemic. And you brought up earlier that I work a lot with the legislature on bills, legislation and law that's germane to sportsmen. We had a bill in the House this year, House Bill 485, that was designed to modernize the penalties for poaching, both jail time and monetary penalties or fines and it made it through the House easily, but it did not make it through the Senate. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you right now, if you watch what happened down in the Peabody WMA this year, there was a hunter from Alabama that was arrested. And when the game warden asked him why he didn't have a license, he said the fine for poaching was less than the license. Let that sink in for a minute.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, let that sink in for a minute. So I follow sportsman's issues from the East Coast to the West Coast, north of Cincinnati, south of Bowling Green. And my friends in the Peabody were tremendously upset about that. It really set them off. And I told them, I said, hey, man, we got House Bill 485. It's sitting in the House of Representatives and the state legislature. We should be able to get this thing through. All it does, it actually recognized U.S. Fish and Wildlife federal game wardens in the state of Kentucky as law enforcement officials, but it also modernized our penalties. It didn't pass. We need the sportsmen and women to get behind that, because there are people that are poaching because they know that the penalty is not a big deal. The other thing, and I know people hate to hear this when I say what it takes to grow the elk herd, people hate to hear this. We need to increase the revenue, the bottom line at the Department of Fish and Wildlife. I don't work there. It is my department. I love what they do holistically, but they do not have enough money to execute the missions we want them to execute. Generally speaking, 80% of the department's budget is what we call non-discretionary, meaning 80% of their budget is people's salaries, people's benefits, maintenance on buildings, maintenance on equipment. So only 20% of the department's budget, generally speaking, they can use for like habitat work, et cetera, et cetera. Well, one of the reasons that we don't have enough elk is the habitat has suffered. So we need to increase revenue. You know, the local Kentuckiana Safari Club, which I am the legislative affairs chairman of, has sent a proposal that would significantly increase the revenue of the department, reference the elk herd. In fact, it could more than double the revenue. But without that revenue, we can't do the studies. We can't do the population studies. We can't do a brainworm study. One of the studies that we would love to see is black bear predation on elk calves. So elk calf recruitment is basically the percentage number of elk calves that live, that are born to cows. We have a expanding, if not blowing up, black bear population. And there's a lot of people that believe, and I tend to agree with them, that our black bears are having a significant effect on elk calves.
Let me jump in right there for a second. So Ed Morris, I don't know, Ed, maybe you do, but he says, with a huge increase in bear populations, has the department done any study on calf depredation by bears? I lost it. The Yellowstone report several years ago showed bears as a major issue on calves and not wolves. And let me say, again, being from Harlan County, people have complained more this year. You know, where my wife's family lives, it's nothing to be sitting on your front porch and just see bears walking down the street, right? And now, though, they've become a much bigger problem in the area than in years past. So it seems like the observations from people living in those areas is like you said, the bear population has just exploded. And so, and then going back to what Ed said, the Yellowstone report showed that bears were a big problem. Thanks, Ed, for that.
Yeah, John, you need to meet and or talk to Ed Morris. Ed's a former president of League of Kentucky Sportsmen and is an extremely well accomplished hunter and well informed sportsman. Thank you, Ed, for that question. What I think Kentucky hunters need to be excited about is our future bear hunting. We're going to have some amazing bear hunting opportunities in the future. The department has one of their best has one of their best young biologists on it. In fact, the young man just earned his PhD, and he gives some of the most detailed briefings. I sit and just take notes when he starts talking. That young man is awesome. And I haven't used any names of the department, so I'm not going to use his name. But our bear biologist is a badass. And I don't think he's had the time or the money or the inertia behind him to do a study on bear predation on elk, but it needs to be done. But once again, you asked me what it would take to expand our herd. In my opinion, an increase in revenue, because not only do we need to do this population study that we just started in conjunction and in cooperation with the University of Kentucky over the next 3 years, we need to do a study on brainworm, and we need to do a study on bear predation. And we just don't have the money, the time, or the effort. We're really strapped for cash. And so there's a couple ways we can make more cash. The Safari Club's proposal doubles the revenue of the elk program, but we might actually get that cash from the federal level. There's actually a bill called the Wildlife Restoration Act at the national level that would basically increase the department's budget by 35 to 45%. If that bill gets passed at the national level, we would have the money to do those studies. So to increase the herd, we need to. I agree with the commissioner that said, limiting the number of elk cows taken is a big proponent. We have to. In fact, my personal opinion, I'm in agreement with some of the elk guides who've quit guiding for cows. I think we should eliminate it for a few years. That's just my personal opinion. I think there's a way to increase revenue that would allow us to do a brainworm study, that will allow us to do habitat work, and that would allow us to do the predation study, the black bear predation study. But right now, the department's cash strapped, and those studies just are not going to happen. Let me see. I took a bunch of notes because I didn't want to just be talking out my butt. To your
This has been great, man. This has been great.
Yeah. The other thing I would say when it comes to our elk herd and increasing the population is we have to be careful when we move elk and how many elk we move. I totally understand. I totally get, and I totally understand that we got our elk from a number of Western states. We got our elk from Arizona, Kansas, North Dakota, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Utah. And I think we got 1,000. Let me look at my notes. Hold on. Yeah, we got 1,541 elk from those 6 states. So it's incumbent upon us, if we have elk that we could give to other states. I think that's important, that we need to do that. But I think there's enough pressure during the elk season that right now, when our elk numbers are down and everybody agrees that they're down, I think we need to be careful. The pressure when we go in and try to trap elk, whether we use the old-fashioned elk corrals where we bait them in and close the door, or we use the newfangled helicopter net gun, that's a lot of pressure on those herds. Just removing a certain number of those elk from the herd pressures the herd. And so the season is, a few months long, and then we go in after the season and we pressure the herd and remove even more elk. And that pressure causes stress. And if we have a tough winter, so in addition to limiting the cow harvests, increasing revenue so we can do habitat work and studies on brainworm and predation, increasing potentially, if the predation study on black bears says that the predation is significant, then we need to kill more black bears to prevent loss of elk. But the other thing I think we need to pay attention to is, if we're going to move elk, we put a significant amount of pressure on those animals after the season, because we trap them and we net them in the winter. And a lot of those are bred cows. and a bred cow is carrying a fetus, and anybody knows who's had a baby, you've got a couple of beautiful babies. If mama's stressed out physically, right? You got beautiful babies. I've seen pictures. If mama's
they're running around here somewhere.
Yeah, but the health of mama is important to the health of those babies. And so when you stress out a pregnant cow, there's a potential she's going to miscarry or whatever. But I really feel like we need to also reduce the turbulence on our elk herd after the season. Once the season's over, we need to let them rest, let them relax, let them recover, especially those bred cows. They need to recover and give birth to healthy babies.
Yeah, I keep seeing a lot of people talk about poaching. Dana says it's a larger problem than people want to acknowledge. Jeremy says that he's heard locals straight up admit to shooting them. What can be done about that? I mean, you can't patrol the area all year long. I mean, what are the steps, or do you even have a suggestion there? What can you do about poaching other than, like you said, the legislation?
So one of the things that I would tell everybody who's listening is, and it's a really good news story. I'm a fan of our current. I've not named any department officials yet, so I'm not going to name this gentleman. I'm a huge fan of our law enforcement division chief, the guy who's in charge of all of our game wardens.
Gotcha.
I'm a big fan, and it's not just because he's a colonel and I'm a colonel. Okay, it's not. This guy really gets it. He gets it. You guys should be super proud of the guy that's in charge of your law enforcement division, because I am. He has been pushing really hard to get more game wardens out of the academy so that we have 120 game wardens on staff, one in each county. I think, and I didn't write this down, but I think I heard him brief in the January Fish and Wildlife Commission meeting that he was going to have 129 game wardens on staff by the end of the year. We have to double down, John. We've got to double down on funding our game wardens. And so let me talk about how this connects. Let me talk about how this connects really quick to one of the legislative items. You brought up the fact that I pay attention to legislation. I work on legislation. House Bill 352 was the governor's budget. The way our budget system works in the state of Kentucky is the governor submits his budget to the House Budget Committee. The House Budget Committee chairman turns the governor's budget into a bill. That bill was House Bill 352. This year, House Bill 352 removed $5.5 million of the department's revenue over a year for 2 years for $11 million over the biennium, or over the 2-year period. That $11 million came from boating registration. Generally speaking, boating registration is directly linked to the funding of our game wardens. So that was a very obtuse, if not ignorant, move by the current administration. The money they removed would have caused the department to reallocate and move around internally the way they budget their money, to internally refund the law enforcement division or our game wardens, because that boating registration money, generally speaking, goes to our game wardens. And we've really got to double down on funding and training our game wardens. Those are the people that have the most contact with the public. I mean, most people don't go to Frankfurt and run into a biologist or run into people that work at the Salado Center. They run into their local game warden. And so we need more of them. And I'm very proud of the gentleman that's running the law enforcement division, and I haven't said any names in the department, but I would love to say his name because he's a badass.
You look it up. Chief of Law Enforcement with the Fish and Wildlife. Man, I tell you, I think I know. I mean, there's been people on here watching. We're going on 70 minutes, and there's been people on here from the very beginning. And I think people are going to go back and watch this over and over. just to get more information on the elk herd. You've done a fantastic job, and I appreciate your time. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap it up here?
There's a couple things. So there's two things referenced the elk draw that we need to talk about real quick that you didn't ask me.
Okay.
The first thing is hunter success rate. A lot of people are upset that the hunter success rate in Kentucky is not what it used to be. Let me tell everybody out there, because I hunt out west, and I'm blessed to have the resources and the money and the time to hunt out west almost every year.
Yep.
The highest, and again, I'm going to go back to 2017 when I did all my research. I really did a deep dive on all this research. Wyoming had a 44.2% success rate. Utah, 25.6% success rate. Montana, 23.1% success rate. Idaho, 20.8% success rate. Colorado, 19.1% success rate. Oregon, 16.7% success rate. Washington, 11% success rate. Kentucky's success rate was number one, 45%. Wow. So there's a lot of complaints out there about our success rate, but the fact of the matter is that we've been spoiled effing rotten. When we started hunting elk in the state of Kentucky, our success rates were over 90%. That's ridiculous.
It is.
There are people that don't hunt whitetails over a corn pile and have 90% success rate. So when the department says that we're about 40% success rate this year, please understand that we're still number one or number two in the entire country. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a friend of the department. In fact, other people at the department hate my guts. I'm just telling you the truth. I'm telling you the facts of the matter.
Non-biased.
Okay?
We are non-biased.
I am non-biased. I'm just a sportsman that tries to inform my friends. And I'm telling you right now, there are people in the department that would like to shoot me dead. The fact of the matter is they're right. And I have to call a spade and the truth the truth. We have probably the number one or number two success rate in the country right now. We still do. But there was a time 6 or 8 years ago when it was off the charts, our success rate. And our number one bull is 416 inches. That wasn't a kill bull. It was a found bull.
Yeah. I've seen that.
But that still entices people. That still entices people to want to come to Kentucky and hunt.
Yeah.
And please, everybody understand that 90% of our general season tags go to resident. Only 10% go to non-resident. So the department's doing pretty good stuff. They got some things they need to fix. And let me close with something they need to fix. And I've talked to the chair of the Fish and Wildlife Commission, and I'm going to go ahead and name him because I'm a big fan of our new commissioner at the Department of Fish and Wildlife Commission, Dr. Carl Kleinert. Dr. Kleinert has been working in conjunction with sportsmen's groups to try to get a second chance or a secondary elk draw. What I think a lot of Kentucky sportsmen don't understand is people assume that if they are drawn in the lottery, they go ahead and buy the license and hunt elk. That's not true. One of the biggest untold truths in our elk lottery is a significant portion of people that are drawn in that lottery don't actually go ahead and buy the permit and buy the license. And so using this year's numbers, there were 175 either sex archery tags issued. Would you like to venture a guess on how many of those people actually bought the license and hunted them? I would love it if it was 175 of 175, but it wasn't. I'm not going to put you on the spot. It was 153. So 22
I was much lower, so I've been way off.
22 people who were drawn. Think about your friends who wish they drew an archery elk license.
Oh, so many
22 people. Yeah, 22 people who were drawn in the lottery didn't actually buy it and go hunting. Let's talk about the bull rifle. Now, I would have thought that had been 100% full rifle. It
Yeah,
wasn't.
that's the granddaddy right there.
That's the Mac Daddy.
Yeah.
144 bought it. So only 6 didn't, but still 6 didn't.
Yeah.
So let's talk about cow. There's 244 cow tags last year. Let's talk about week 1, just week 1. 122 cow tags were issued week 1. How many folks you think actually bought it and went hunting?
100.
I didn't tell you that. You're spot on.
Ah, yes.
Okay.
I got one.
Yeah, you got one. So 153 of 175 actually bought the either sex archery after they won it in the lottery. 144 out of 150 actually bought the bull rifle after they won in the lottery. 100 out of 122 actually bought the cow tag after they won in the lottery. So out of all those tags, 50 people, 22 either sex, 6 rifle bull, and 22 cow, who won a lottery permit, did not buy it and didn't go hunting. 50.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's more than I would have thought. I would have loved to have been one of those 50. Had the opportunity. Yeah.
So a lot of Western states have what they call a leftover license purchase process, or they have a secondary draw.
Oh.
Sportsmen's groups, of which I am proud to be one of them, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, and Kentucky Annis Furry Club, and the League of Kentucky Sportsmen, we all got together last year and recommended to the department that they have a secondary draw to sell those 50 that didn't get bought. And that's what happens in a lot of Western states. They draw for a tag, and maybe somebody has a family issue, maybe they don't have the money to hunt, whatever the case may be. Right. They don't actually buy the license and hunt, even though they drew the tag. Right. And they give a deadline in Western states. They give a deadline that says you got to buy it by this date. If they don't buy it, then they sell it again. And we were advocating to the Fish and Wildlife Commission and the department that happened in Kentucky. And I think they are about to finally take us seriously. We are told that Friday morning. So this Friday morning, ladies and gentlemen, 8:30 a.m., there's going to be a commission meeting virtually, just like this Facebook Live. There's going to be a commission meeting. At that commission meeting, we are told that they are finally going to come up with an idea that allows the department to sell those unpurchased elk tags. So that's something you didn't ask me about, and I don't think a lot of people
wasn't aware. Yep.
Yeah, a lot of people win an elk permit in that lottery, but then they don't go ahead and buy it, and a bunch of those permits go unused, and they should be sold. It's a loss of revenue to the department.
Yep, I agree, 100%. Jerry says they should be excluded for 10 years. Yeah. So, all right, man. Well, I sure do appreciate it. I know a lot of people are enjoying this, or going to enjoy this. A couple things on my end. When this is over, I'm going to share this on my page. If you're watching when this is over, there were people that weren't able to get on tonight, didn't know about this. Share it on your page, share it in your groups. Get this information out. So many questions. I've had so many messages and so many comments of questions about the elk herd and next steps and the draw, the lottery, whatever. And this answered a lot of those tonight. So make sure you share. I'm going to download it, put it on our YouTube channel, and hopefully this will turn into a podcast episode once we have that launched. One other thing that's non-elk related, we talked about bear hunting. The chase only season starts June 1st, and I'm wanting to do something in our magazine with some people who are participating in that. I don't know anyone who is. So if you know someone, share my information with them. Would love to talk to them and talk about hunting bears with dogs. That really fascinates me. So next thing, public land owner right there. sharing his shirt. So thank you so much, Colonel, for coming on. I appreciate you. I have tremendous respect for you. You've been, we've known each other for a few weeks, and man, I always enjoy talking to you. If you're willing, this will not be the last time we have you on for sure. So, with that said, we will go ahead and end it. 80 minutes, man, that's a great run. We had some technical difficulties, but we made it. And so share this, like it, and Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, Kentucky chapter, join, KentuckyOutdoorsTV.com, Kentucky Outdoors Media on Facebook. Follow us, like our page, subscribe. Thank you guys so much. Colonel, have a good one.
God bless you.